Beatriz Macias, how did you start to play the flute?
Yes, so actually, my parents love classical music, so we had the Metropolitan Opera playing every weekend at home. And Montserrat Caballé, very famous Spanish soprano, was on TV. And I heard her sing, and I said immediately, I can do that. I can do exactly what she's doing. So my parents thought, of course she must be, imagining that she can sing like Montserrat Caballé. I went to my room, I started singing. My mom opens the door and she asks, is this you or is this a recording? I said, no, Mom, it's me. So actually, I wanted to become an opera singer. That was the first thing I wanted to be, was a singer. Flute was introduced.
How old were you?
I was about 10, 11 years old. And flute was introduced to me about a year later through the marching band. So my parents are from Mexico, but I grew up in Houston, Texas. So as you probably know, in Texas, music education, marching bands is a huge thing. It's just part of, let's say, almost a part of the culture. So I was introduced to the flute through marching band, and I loved it because actually I couldn't play the flute at the beginning. Flute, as a composer, you know that flute is actually quite easy to play. It's easy to make a sound. Anybody can make a sound because it's like blowing on a Coke bottle. That's how they teach you how to play. Unfortunately, it took me about a week to be able to make a sound. So I told my parents, I'm done. I quit like everything else. I don't want to play anymore. So let's take it back. And for the first time, my mom said, okay, fine, you want to quit? Sure, tomorrow we go to the band director and you can tell them that you're quitting. Well, I don't know what it was about that response that really ignited this fire in me. So I got the flute out, I went to my room, and that was the start of a 20-something year career.
Your mother was very cunning.
Maybe, yeah. I've actually asked her about that, but she said no, there was no intention behind her words.
Okay. Do you remember what Montserrat Caballé was singing?
No, nothing.
So you haven't tried to sing the same piece?
I have not tried to sing the same.
No.
See, I'm actually also a singer, and she's a little bit different type of voice type than I am. But whatever it was, I loved it.
Yeah. Does the flute playing and singing support each other now?
I would say yes. It depends. Maybe in the way that I teach my students about the support of the breathing. That's very similar in the flute playing or if you are a singer. As a performer, however, it is a little bit different. People think that singing and flute playing is the same, that you have similar methods, or you go through similar, for example, the support or the breathing, but it's a little bit different. For example, the breathing. When you breathe as a flute player, especially as a woman, you can breathe quite high in order to have more air. For example, Debussy Afternoon of a Faun. If you want to be able to make it through an entire phrase, you can't breathe very low. You actually have to, breathe quite low, but then take air all the way to the top. You would never do that as a singer. You always breathe low, stay low. So that's just one example.
What about interpretation and phrasing?
I think this is extremely helpful, and this should be something that should be taught at schools more often. I know some conservatories do that, but especially like conservatories that teach little kids, that start them very early on. As a woodwind instrument, singing should really be like a requirement if you play whatever woodwind instrument, even as a brass player. Because of the wind, yes, of the imagination. My teacher in Boston used to say, and she was the piccolo player of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, if you have a technical issue, it's because you're not thinking of the music. So every time I got stuck in the technique of the instrument, I put it away and I sung it, or I blew the melody, or whatever it was, and then secondary was the instrument. So actually first was that music part, and second was the technique of it.
Yeah. So you have studied in Boston?
Yes.
And somewhere else?
Yeah, so I did my bachelor's in Boston with Geraldine Cotticone, who used to be the piccolo player in the Boston Symphony Orchestra. beautiful person. Actually, she had to leave her orchestra position very early on because she got dystonia, this vocal dystonia. Okay. And I think she was in her early 20s. And after that, after 3 years in Boston, I went to Brussels, and it was my first time, well, not my first time in Europe, but my first time in Brussels studying, and I did my master's there.
Yeah, and after that you have worked in different orchestras and in different countries.
Yes, actually, I've been one of the few lucky American flute players that has been able to make a career in Europe. And because of that is mainly the style is very different. The American way of flute playing is a little bit different than the European. And I'm generalizing here because Europe is very big and you have Germany and France, and they play very different styles as well. But when I went to Brussels, Brussels owns, for example, all the original scores of J.S. Bach. Okay. And I studied with someone who was like anti-vibrato. So something that makes American flute playing very distinct is the way and how much we use vibrato on the instrument. So imagine coming from that to Brussels and then being told, okay, Beatriz, for an entire year, you cannot play with vibrato. It was a huge shock. I didn't know how to do that.
So you had to practice a lot not to play with vibrato.
I did. Yeah. Here it's a little bit the opposite. Flute players have to practice how to play with vibrato, and there we have to practice how not to play with vibrato. But something that has helped me as a flutist has been that I also sing. And when you don't use vibrato, you actually need more support. And that's what a lot of people sometimes miss or misunderstand.
Yeah. Would you tell about the mentality differences between America and Europe, how the orchestra and musicians work?
The mentality. I want to say first, okay, the style is different, yes, because every culture is different and every culture has a way of interpreting the music. I can't really speak so much about the mentality, but I think, for example, American orchestras, they play, whether it's Strauss, whether it's Bach, whether it's Mozart, it's almost all the same. They treat every piece of music as though it's played the same. So let's take Cleveland Orchestra. They have a particular beautiful sound. We can distinguish Cleveland Orchestra from Los Angeles, from the Metropolitan Opera by their sound, right? But still, even if they play different music, it still sounds the same. Something that European orchestras, what I like, and again, I'm generalizing, but European orchestras can really play Bach as Bach is supposed to be played, Sibelius as Sibelius is supposed to be played. I mean, that is the beauty of it, know that every piece has its own uniqueness, its own way of playing.
Yeah. You have created Tampere Flute Fest. How did that start?
Yes.
How did you get that going?
Okay, so
it has been a few years now.
This will be our third year in the running. We're quite new.
Yeah.
So I moved to Tampere in the fall of 2016 to work with the Tampere Philharmonic Orchestra. And it was only under a temporary contract, so that I knew that I would be here for a couple of months, and then I would go back to, I was working back then in Luxembourg. I was the principal flutist in one of the orchestras in Luxembourg. And well, happens to be that I met my husband, who's from here, and he works in the orchestra. So that temporary contract became a little bit more permanent. And I began to get to know a lot of the flute players here, a little bit more, what is outside of Tampere, what is outside of the Tampere Philharmonic Orchestra. And I had this idea of, why don't we create something that is just not here? I'm a flute player. I probably will not have a job here. These jobs are secured until, as you know, once you get the job, you're here until you die. So why not create something good with the skills that I've been able to develop and all of this experience that I have gathered from, as an American flutist coming to Europe, coming to Finland, which is so, why Finland? So far away from the normal. So I thought, let's create a flute festival. But the idea was first only to do like a couple of master classes, just a weekend of let's have, Alexi Roman, who's principal in the Finnish National Opera. Now he was in Jyväskylä before. There's a lot of young, eager flutists who want to do something, but we don't really hear of them outside of Finland. So I thought, okay, this is my opportunity to be able to tell a little bit, my outsiders, the internationals, a little bit more of what is this young talent here in Finland. And that's how Tampere Flute Fest came to be. So next year is our 3rd year in the running.
Yeah. What kind of events do you have?
Well, we have the normal festival events, we have master classes, we have recitals. One unique thing is we have an annual competition for young flute players, the Young Artist Competition, and this is the only flute competition that takes place annually in Finland. It's also an international competition, and what we like to do with this is not to make it seem, like that unfriendly type of competition, but to change people's minds. What are the things that you can get, the positive things that you can gain from competitions? What do they teach you? And that is something that we want to be able to kind of slowly change in this world of competition. So that's what makes us a little bit unique.
Yeah, you get friends and contacts. Yeah.
So many skills. Yeah.
Yeah. How the festival has been received in Tampere and elsewhere?
I want to say at the beginning it was not so well received, but I'm one of those people that I know when it's not so well received, it's because you're actually doing something good. I think the first thing was probably, and we tried not to steps, and I say we because I have a team. We tried not to step on anybody's toes here, but unfortunately sometimes people don't really lie.
Toes are everywhere.
Toes are everywhere.
Yeah.
That's very nice, yes. But, we've been able to gain our reputation. Like I said, this is our 3rd year running, so we've shown that we are doing something positive and we want to bring the community together. That's the whole point.
Yeah. What kind of logic you must have in order to create a successful festival? What kind of attitudes or rules there are?
I think I like that you say attitudes better than rules, because attitude is everything. We know that. If you have a positive attitude, winter here can seem lovely, for example.
When it's snow.
Yes, when there's snow and no sun. But I think that through my life as a musician, I know that to have the courage to do something is first of all what you really need. So the logic of it is you really need a lot of guts. Not so much knowledge. Of course you need that is important, but you need more guts than you need knowledge. Why? Because as a musician, when you do auditions, when you go present yourself, most of the time you're probably not going to win that audition. So you're gonna face much more rejection that you're going to face, 2 or 3 positive times that you are able to win a position, right? So it's the same thing with this. First, have the courage to do it. Then second, pick a team who can support you. In Tampere, called the Tampere Flute Fest, we are supporting the city. We are trying to find what ways can we better support Tampere. How can we include the resources of the city? And so, logistics here and there, you can be very mathematical about it, very logical about it, and then you can be very creative also. So we're trying to do both things at once.
Yeah. What kind of future plans do you have for the festival? Is it going to grow to some direction?
I hope so. I think especially because we are in Finland, we have a huge advantage. And the advantage is that you're not only selling a festival, you're selling a country. You're selling Tampere, you're selling the idea of Finland. And I think that's something, as an international, I have this curiosity for the country. I have this different type of love for it that locals do. So I do think that the festival will grow. It's exciting to see how it's going to grow and where it's going to grow. But I think that more and more, as we start to develop these newer ideas, I see that we might take a little bit of a side turn to involve technology, to involve, what is this 21st century world we are actually living in?
Yeah. You have lived in Finland 5 years now.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you like the country, the weather or food or people?
I'm happy you didn't ask me about the language. I love the country. I think the country is wonderful. I think the food, I love salmon. Salmon is my favorite, very healthy. I do actually like winter. The only thing is I don't cope very well with the lack of vitamin D. You know, as I said, my parents are from Mexico. I grew up in Texas. So Texas, please, I mean, we have maybe 15 minutes of rain once a year. There's sun all year around. So I'm a little bit like a sunflower. If I don't see sun, I get a little bit, not depressed, but a little bit sad.
Yeah. Do you see America differently now when you have been in Finland so many
That's
years?
a very good question that I have not been asked, and the answer is yes. I see the world a lot different, not just from coming to Finland, but since I first stepped to Europe. And that's why I really encourage young people to travel, because it opens your eyes. It opens I mean, I may sound very American, but the experience that I've gathered, you appreciate other cultures, you appreciate other religions, and just everything. It's so important. I think the very first thing when I went back from spending 2 years in Brussels during my master's, and I went back to visit my parents, was, is this a size small Coke? I mean, it's huge. A size small is an extra large here. So.
Yeah. You have been in so many places and doing so many things. Do you have some secret energy source? Or how can you manage all what you're doing?
What do you mean? Like when I travel, how do I manage?
Traveling and organizing and events and doing all. Do you have some sport? Do you do sports or mentality or what?
Yes, I do Pilates or I run. It kind of depends where I am. It's a little bit hard when you have not like a daily schedule, a routine. When you don't have a routine, it's hard to make a routine. But I try to always do some type of exercise, especially for my breathing, because as a wind instrument, that's very important. So apart from the physical aspects of, looking good, you need to be able to be fit in order to perform. That's a must. And for sure, I take mental practice as being more important than physical practice, because if your mind is okay, you're okay. And that's a huge thing when I travel, when I perform, because most of the time you're tired, your muscles are tired from carrying luggage. So, you probably won't go if you have a recital the next day and you've been traveling 20 hours, US to here or here to the US, you probably don't want to over-exercise your muscles. So what do? You put yourself in the right place. So I take mental practice as a number one thing.
Could you tell about those?
Yes. Long time ago, I was also studying in Germany, and in Germany they have a really wonderful Klaus Schuwerk, and he probably didn't say his name very German or very beautiful, but Klaus teaches the trumpet department, and he taught these almost yoga mental exercises. And so I use that as the very first step in my mental practice before I prepare for anything. And something very simple, and you probably have seen this. So you put 2 fingers here, and you put 1 finger on your nostril. You breathe in, you breathe out, and you change. You breathe in and you breathe out, and you change. So you are almost creating this so you don't have to fully put yourself on the floor to do yoga. You can do something very simple sitting on a chair and just be able to control your mind through that. So I do breathing exercises, and then I do a lot of confirmation phrases like, you're victorious, you're successful, you're really good, today's gonna be a great day. And it sounds very silly, but if you say those things on a daily basis, it changes your mind, it changes who you are, and you start to see yourself that way.
Yeah, and you have to really do it like you have said to yourself.
Because who else is going to do it?
Yeah.
You see yourself every day, so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for being with us here at Verkotehdas.
Thank you so much, it was a pleasure.
Yeah.